Hello, this is Philip, and I am a young Earth creationist, even though about 6,000 years is not young. That sounds pretty old, but it is what it is. I am possibly planning on making videos about every 2 weeks, about science and culture from a biblical perspective. So far it's been all about science, but I am probably gonna upload some culture videos fairly soon, but I would like to hear some opinions on that if you have any. So let's get to the video. Evolutionists constantly attack creationists and say, what use are kinds? Kinds are so useless in science. What do we need that for? And creationists oftentimes, more than not, have a response that I don't really like that much, unfortunately. And it usually is something along the lines of, well, species isn't very accurate in science either, and I really don't like that response because I use both. I use kinds and species and family. I use it all. I read secular books about animals all the time. I haven't even read a creationist one yet, although I have one in my Jeep right now, so I will probably not be able to say that very soon. But I use species and kind, and they're both very useful to me. So my reasons will not be including that topic. As you'll see, when you think of the tree of life, you probably think about the evolutionary tree of life. But from a biblical perspective, and what it actually probably looked like is this. And from about 4,000 years ago, when Noah landed and the animals got off the ark, it went from a smaller amount of kinds to the ginormous amount of species that we have today. And is that evolution? No, of course not. It is an observable process called speciation. I'm going to read a definition. Speciation is the process by which new species form. It occurs when groups in a species become reproductively isolated and diverge. Unfortunately, a lot of schools today teach that speciation is a part of evolution. And of course, it's not. Evolution requires that new information appears, but speciation actually accomplishes quite the opposite. Let me explain something for just a minute. And this might sound like I'm going off topic, but hopefully it comes together for you. To put this as simply as possible, when two people in the same family have a kid, the kid is much more likely to have a mind or health impairment at birth, if it even makes it to birth, because people from the same family are going to have similar mutations and similar genes, but their good genes are going to be similar, so they're not going to cover for the mutations, if that makes sense. When God created everything, He created it good, and He said it was good. Therefore, there was no bad mutations, no messed up genes, or anything like that. So when Adam and Eve's kids married each other, when they had sons and daughters, it was not wrong. There were no bad mutations to be passed on yet. After the curse, God knew that over time mutations would be building up. So eventually, in Leviticus 18, 20, and also in Deuteronomy, He made incest wrong, and it was a sin from then onward. Human DNA at creation was likely way more diverse than it is today. An example of this is my wife. She looks way different than me right now. Well, I guess always she did, but it's a perfect example of a long time ago, humans were a mixture of what information we have now in our DNA. God also created animals by the kind, and the first animals of that kind would be more genetically diverse than the species that we have today. For example, cats probably are one kind, and like the tigers on my shirt, might be hard to see, but they look way different than, for example, a house cat. And also, an example of a genetically diverse animal that is alive today is the wolf. Some dog breeders say that within 200 years, they could get a domestic dog if they tried. And eventually from a wolf, if you give it even more time than that, you could get something like a Chihuahua. But to prove that it is losing information and not just information appearing, you can't just breed Chihuahuas into a wolf because they have lost DNA information. Another example of an animal that has less genetic information and has way too many mutations is the cheetah. Scientists have found that all cheetahs are genetically very close to each other and leads to many mutations. And the inbreeding problem of cheetahs could potentially and unfortunately lead to their future extinction. So new information doesn't just appear and then therefore a species appears. Speciation is an example of information spreading out from within the kind. The information that is already there from the day of creation. To sum things up, the reasons why kinds are relevant today is that kinds was a very accurate way to identify animals at the time of creation and at the time they got off the ark. And it shows us interested in science the accurate history of where we got the amazing amount of species that we have in the world today. And okay, he's practically begging us to see the history of our species. He tells us the size of the ark, and he didn't even have to do that. He even told us the amount of each kind that gets on the ark. And we can see how many species we have today. We don't even have to research that science that I just talked about a little bit today before we know the history of our species. Let me know your thoughts. Alright, until next time, see ya guys!